Welcome to Coffee and a Conversation hosted by CJ Abernathy for South Dakota District 23 Senate 2020. A father, an activist, a Marine Corps combat veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan, Purple Heart recipient with a bachelor's degree in information technology software engineering. CJ is the executive producer for the Adam vs. the Man podcast with Adam Kokesh, and the CEO of Internet Warlords, the War for the Internet, as well as a former 2018 South Dakota Libertarian gubernatorial candidate, and a 2020 South Dakota delegate to the Libertarian National Convention. If you would like to join this broadcast, click the link in the description. Coffee and a Conversation starts now. Have a great day, or don't. The choice is always yours.
Morning, everybody. It's your boy CJ, the Internet Warlord, coming to you live and loud from the great state of Meth Dakota. You know Meth Dakota, it's a state just south of North Dakota, the state north of Nebraska. That Dakota, the state formerly known as South Dakota until the Queen of Meth, Governor Kristi Noem, declared by proclamation that we're all on meth, and now life has never been the same, and the world is coming to an end, and it can all be traced back to the brain cells of one individual in a state that most people do not care about. So I got a great show for you today, great broadcast. I'm going to try to keep it as professional as I can. It's not every day you get to interview people that are doing some pretty cool things, and the person that I'll be interviewing today is certainly one of them. I love how it shows me comments will start coming in, but nobody's watching. Good morning, Matt. I see you there, sir. Let me just start by getting my morning rant out. I didn't do Coffee and a Conversation yesterday. Something seemed off in the world. Something just didn't feel right. Yesterday, we started the new broadcast, Adam Loves the Man, and my body is physically rejecting, is the best way to put it, statism, but I'm going to have fun with it. I rewatched some of the show yesterday, and oh, God, it's hard to watch, but so worth it. All things considered. So I just want to say, Adam, keep up the great work. That was definitely a hell of a day yesterday. So I feel like this broadcast should be shared here to a few people here. Go ahead and send this one out to the XCOM chat. South Dakota Liberty chat. Why does it say him, huh? Okay.
Did you eat all?
Let's see who else. Who else should see this? The candidates, certainly. And we'll give it to Randy there. Send him the live broadcast so he can watch backstage or while he's getting ready. There's a time zone difference, so unfortunately we had the time zone screwed up, so I think we'll compromise with Randy and hopefully get him on here with the next 15-20 minutes or so. But until then, I've got stories. I will be, like I said, interviewing Randy Llewellyn. He's running for House against Dusty Johnson for the U.S. House of Representatives, and that is a federal election. So I'm really looking forward to hearing the difference between, state and federal elections and his experiences on the campaign trail, and also just where he sees the Libertarian Party this year. And we got a few questions. So if you want to leave a question in the comment for Randy Llewellyn, the guy who is running for House seat here in South Dakota, please leave it in the comments. It's really weird to watch yourself as Facebook Live Time puts captions over your video it really gives you that perspective in your speech. Just a crazy thought. So as always, if you're offended by my videos, please let me know so I can do more of these topics. Other than that, that's about as crazy as I'm going to get. I do want to go over a few stories here, maybe get Randy's opinion on this as well. Good morning, Mr. Ingram. Either I'm being shadow banned where people are, or else people have attention spans that can only be measured in nanoseconds today. So I'm not talking about you, Matt. Anyways, let's get right to it. So right out the gate, as always, South Dakota, personal freedom, not a part of no one's thinking on legal pot in South Dakota. Now, before you say, CJ, you're just a Republican that likes to smoke weed, that, which is a very much a misnomer. I do like to smoke cannabis. This is a public statement that I have no problem making. Unfortunately, I'm what you call a seaweed smoker. If I don't see weed, I don't smoke weed. And it's called being an adult, you know, having that. What's the word they were using? It's like you have, it's like the tip of the tongue. It's like the first two words of a news story that I believe in. What are they? What's? Oh yeah, personal freedom. Oh yeah, self-ownership. Things that make it so that I own my body and what I put in it and consume is my choice. It's my personal freedom. Now, the Argus leader here, maybe not the greatest of friends to the governor or the queen of meth, as I love to call her. But one thing that they are doing that is, it was right, is calling her out on this. You know, during the COVID-19 pandemic, whichever you prefer in your social circles, at least she has been saying that freedom is no lockdowns. Freedom is your right. Here in South Dakota, we're more free. We didn't shut down, although, you know, when the state government's holding a gun to localities' heads saying, hey, all these deaths that are going to pile up because we're not locking down, that's going to be on you, Mr. Mayor. It's going to be on you, local representatives. And she's really good at passing the buck, placing the blame away from where it should be, where with responsibility when it comes to government. But no, she says that lockdowns are tyranny, but what you put in your body, that's still up for the government to decide. So let's see here. Nope, wrong button. The Queen of Meth talks a lot about personal freedom while defending her hands-off approach to the COVID-19 pandemic. The first term Queen of Meth of Meth Dakota, though, does not support a libertarian approach. Now, this is where, again, this is why I pulled this article, because we're going to discuss the libertarian approach here in just a moment. To the use of drugs such as marijuana, which, see, this is why fake news is real, but fake news isn't Donald Trump like, hey, you're fake news. No, fake news is real, is real in the sense that you're just not factually correct. See, this is why you need somebody like me who's going to run for a top office, who's going to correct the improper grammar use of words in the propaganda used. First off, marijuana, sidebar, is a racist word. Start calling it cannabis. We, as journalists, for the Argus leader, I don't know how I have to do your job to say, hey, you're racist. So this is racist propaganda. And first off and foremost, the libertarian approach to use drugs such as marijuana, which voters will decide whether to legalize for both medical and recreational use this next election. The libertarian approach, and voters decide on medical and recreational in the same year, also due to a libertarian approach to the drug war, which I personally know people that did the work, got the signatures, grinded the streets, were busting their tails just to get it done. And what happens? They go to turn in the signatures, and the Queen of Meth sees the group, and she hides in a closet with only one way out. That's what she did to the cannabis people. She would take pictures with everybody else that agrees with her ideologically, but be a group of people out there on the streets petitioning thousands of her servants, her subjects, and her slaves, her serfs, her chattel, whatever you want to call it, tax slaves. She of course she's mad because see, it's not about personal freedom. The word freedom, it doesn't mean what she thinks it means. I really think that if you questioned her, what do you actually think freedom means, you'd get a really not so intelligent answer. Again, I'm trying to be nice. This is me trying to be nice. Good morning at my first broadcast of the week. Noam has said repeatedly during this campaign that she opposes both initiated Measure 26 medical and Constitutional Amendment A recreational. And Friday, during an interview with the Argus leader at the Sioux Falls Convention Center, the Queen of Meth said she opposes legalizing marijuana in any fashion because it would, quote, hurt South Dakota families in the long run. Now, this is the propaganda. This is the fear-mongering. In fact, this is a fact. Governor Kristi Noem is responsible for more deaths than cannabis. I'm waiting, Facebook. If I'm lying, I will deactivate my Facebook account and you'll never see me again. Kristi Noem is personally responsible for more murders than deaths caused by cannabis. Kristi Noem is responsible for more deaths, but yet this one plant that has never killed anybody, less deadly than COVID-19. COVID-19, personal freedom. How dare anybody lock us down? Let us all run wild. We have our freedom. But when it comes to healing yourself, when it comes to, see, they like to say it's a gateway drug. I think Adam's right. I think it's a gateway drug to questioning your government. And I think they know that. To questioning the reality of the world you live in. That's just the way I see it. So the fear-mongering is evident in this propaganda as exposed by this. She said, quote, the Queen of Meth said, I ran for governor telling people that I wanted to build stronger families and create more opportunities for our kids. And I just don't see smoking pot as a gateway to helping people be better, which is, again, the most ignorant statement from the Queen of Meth. She is, this is me trying to be nice so it's still shareable. This is me really doing my best to, there's no nice words I can say about this. Honestly, I have met people in my life that would not be alive today. I have met veterans that have gone to wars and seen things way worse than me. Way worse than me. And if they didn't have it, they would be one of them 22 a day. That, I'm sure if you ask Kristi Noem, well, we need to stop the 22 a day suicides. I'll bet you she'll take that stance. We need to help veterans. And then what does the veteran community say back to the Queen of Meth? Cannabis helps us. Doctors are telling us that cannabis helps us. I had 2 doctors in Washington State tell me, CJ, we can't tell you to use cannabis because it's against the law, but CJ, cannabis would help you. That's because at some point you got to be real with people. The propaganda that the Queen of Meth is pushing, listen, that's an old mentality, and it really sucks. And listen, if you're living in South Dakota and you're hearing my words, just know that we have to wait for this ignorance to die. And I'm not saying in the sense that go out and do this on your own. I'm saying natural course of things. We have to wait until the Queen of Meth is no longer the Queen of Meth. And she and her and that mentality are dead and gone because there's a voting block of money that's perpetuating this propaganda, that's continuing to push veterans into suicides and to people that need this as a medicine. It's it's only delaying it. So yes, when I say every suicide that could have been stopped by medical cannabis, I mean that blood is on Kristi Noem's hands. I mean it full-heartedly, and I feel like it'd be irresponsible of me not to put the blame where the blame belongs. Because imagine like this. Let's flip the script. Let's say CJ Abernathy became governor of South Dakota in 2018. Let's just flip the script. I did run. Hi, you're having medical issues. Your doctor saying cannabis could help you. If I had became governor, personal freedom, choice, self-ownership, those are all decisions that you as a person should get to make with you and your family and your doctor. This is not something that your government should be deciding for you. But here we are with, again, this Argus leader propaganda. But proponents of legal marijuana say that flies in the face of her repeated calls for less government involvement in people's lives amid the coronavirus pandemic. While Noem has championed personal responsibility during the pandemic, many of her fellow governors issued stay-at-home order restrictions and mask mandates. Dre Samuelson, political director of the South Dakotans for Better Marijuana Laws, the campaign committee formed in support of Constitutional Amendment A, said the governor's anti-marijuana stance runs counter to her position on personal freedom and self-governing. I just got to take a minute just to say, hey, you know what? I, too, know what it's like to speak out against the Queen of Meth. I, too, know what it's like to have to use your voice in your political speech to say something contradictory to the mainstream that they're trying to push in government. And so I want to commend this guy, Mr. Samuelson, for speaking the truth, for calling her out on it, and then getting the media attention on it. His quote here says, without getting into the issues of the governor's position on COVID prevention itself, I absolutely believe the governor's many statements on freedom and personal responsibility are at odds with her position on marijuana legalization reforms embodied in Amendment A and Measure 26, which are interconnected. And again, I think that's about as far into the story here as I'm going to go. But you can see the propaganda is real, folks. And, I wish that there was a way that we could, as adults, discuss this in a way that's not so apolitical, where I'm not coming at it from the libertarian side of let's end the drug war, to her saying, no, let's beef up the drug war. It's too apolitical warfare politically, especially when the Argus leader says it's the libertarian approach. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love the fact that is where they're putting the blame of the conversation in the libertarian approach. But libertarianism isn't about you being able to just smoke crack on the street corner because you want to, even though you should be able to if you're not hurting anybody. If you're not, again, no victim, no crime. But the bigger point here to be made is where, again, what's the words that I was looking for? It's almost like she says them a lot, and she says that we're responsible for ourselves. It's personal freedom. Oh yeah, personal freedom. That's what the Libertarian Party's about. Our very first plank is self-ownership. You own yourself. You own your body, what your labors from it. So where, again, it blows my mind is we allow, as a rational thinking adult population, we allow this type of propaganda. And unfortunately, it gets away. So unfortunately, I will continue to have to speak this message until one of two outcomes. Either the government murders me for my opinion, or the government changes and we, the people, vote for these measures in a way that they can't take it away. The constitutional amendment is no joke. There's legislators, of course, doing their thing, saying, "Well, this shouldn't be a constitutional amendment," and they say that because they don't want you to make the decisions for them. They want to know how they can get their hands into it, tax it, regulate it, and make it benefit them and the people that donate to them. But when the people do it in a constitutional amendment, that's us telling the government, no, this is what your scope of power is, and hopefully it's as limited as possible. So that's what I've got for that. Speaking of South Dakota, I do have Randy Llewellyn here in studio backstage. Give me just a minute, Randy, and I'll bring you on. I see you looking snazzy today. If she legalized cannabis in South Dakota's agricultural revenue could be huge, but because her husband couldn't make a profit off of cannabis farmers, she doesn't want it. Very interesting conspiracy. I say conspiracy because she'll deny it. But the truth is yeah, it's weird to have a crop insurance adjuster for a first husband, first man, gentleman. And there's a conflict of interest that was exposed during the hemp legalization, voting for it in DC while being my next guest position he's running for. She voted for it while doing what he's running to do, and then came back here, ran for governor, and said no, it's the same as any other bad drug, which is crazy to me. But anyways, with that being said, I'm not going to leave my guest waiting. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, running for South Dakota House, I am honored to be joined today by Randy Llewellyn. How you doing this morning, sir?
Well, after the fiasco this morning, and I have to apologize to CJ. Thank you for having me on. But what happened was we forgot to clarify what time the event was going to happen, and I'm West River, and he's East River. And
yes.
So, but we've overcome that. I mean, it was a shuffle.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at the time, Randy, we're about 9:30. We're about halfway through. That's a good compromise. But that's being on the fly, and that's going to show that you can be connected to anybody in the world in a half hour. That's the time we live in. And so running for a House of Representatives seat, you got to see the benefit in the ability to connect to any constituent. Really, I asked you for an interview over a post on a comment thread. I really wish that we could have thrown Dusty Johnson on the screen here with us and had a conversation that I think South Dakota, and if not the Libertarian Party, our country needs to hear, because I was going to play this, and I've got it queued up, ready to go. So before you go too far, I want to give you guys just a little sneak preview of Randy's work here and what I saw and why I wanted to bring him on. So give me just
Can I say something, CJ?
Yes, sir. Go. Absolutely. Floor is yours.
Let me tell you something about Dusty Johnson. He has taken time out of his very busy schedule to meet with me and to visit and to get to know each other. That's huge for me. And on top of that, we have kind of this unspoken agreement that each candidate will be treated equally.
Okay.
And what that means is he and I both, and I know that I definitely adhere to it, is that if I get an interview or I get some way to get to the public and recognized in that way, that he gets he should be treated equally. That is to say, given the equal opportunity. And Dusty's not here today because he is busy, and that's what he has said. But I know that you have actually extended the same invitation to him at maybe at another given time where he also can participate. And I appreciate that about Dusty. I really do. And I want people to know that.
And that's fair enough. So that's a great segue. So speaking of media, and we're going to get into a full dive into your run here and a little bit about you. But I really do appreciate that, though, that he would even take that mindset, even being Republican Libertarian. And I want to dive into that more later. But I want to show everybody what brought you to the table here. After watching this, I thought this was a great introduction
in terms of any type of gun law. What do you think that conversation needs to look like?
Well, first of all, rights, Stephanie, are things you don't need permission for. Okay, let's be real clear about that. We have the right to own and bear arms. We don't need permission. Anytime you start legislating, that means you're saying you have to have permission to do this. And we don't need permission. It's a right, okay? We have right to freedom of speech. We don't need so much permission to tell us when we can and can't speak, all right? So let's keep our rights. That's paramount. And the most important right is individual rights.
So that's where we're at with that. What was one thing that you hoped to talk to today that you hope voters understand about you and what you would do if you make it to Washington? One thing that I didn't ask you.
Being a child of the 60s and the 70s, we need to end the wars, the undeclared wars. Our military should be used for defense only. We need to bring our men home. We have wasted our youth. We've wasted our resources. I mean, the Middle East war, what do we spend over there? 17 trillion? I mean, not that I would say that we should use it to pay for everybody's health care or pay off their student loan, but I mean, my God. And what did we get for that?
Mm-hmm.
We got dead bodies. And we killed a lot of innocent civilians. It's got to end, people. All right? And it's up to Congress to say they need to take back that right. It used to be, before we could use our troops anywhere, there had to be a declaration of war that was approved by the people through their representatives. That hasn't happened since the 60s. We need it back. The executive branch is to execute the will of the people as put forth by the representatives, not make policy and not pursue policy. Just execute it.
Mm-hmm.
We tell them what to do through our representatives. I want it back. You should want it back too.
Your final thoughts today as voters are listening to our conversation. What would you say to them?
That was
as they
something
head
else there,
to
Randy.
the
I gotta
voting
tell
booth
you,
to
to
vote?
interrupt that, that's
And as you've, you've traveled across the state, your final thoughts to voters.
I'm gonna give you two quotes from a Democrat and a Republican. All right. One of my favorite ones is John F. Kennedy. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And then there's Abraham Lincoln. We must think anew and act anew, then we can save our country. Two very fine men. When you go to the polls, think about what I said about a dysfunctional duopoly. This is not a two-party system, although people will say, oh, this is a two-party system. Look at the candidate, research the issues, decide what you want, and then vote therefore.
All right. Randy.
Woo, Randy, man, that I'm telling you, that clip came, and again, we tried to find the whole thing. Devin Saxon and myself, communications director for the LP here in South Dakota, we're going to actually take yours and Dusty's interviews and critique them back to back and figure out who was speaking that true freedom speak. And one of the things that I pointed out in there when you went to the wars, being a veteran myself, did you serve? Were you in the military?
Yes, yeah. I've got 10 good years.
So 10 years in, I had 4 years in. Which branch? Army, Marines?
Army.
Okay, so 10 years Army, and
any other branch really. The others are just our helpers.
Yeah. My stepdad's was in the Air Force for 20-something years. He would take offense to that, but he tells me the chairs were really nice though. One of the things about being in the military and hearing you say that and knowing that these endless wars, this perpetual war, we haven't had a declared declaration by war in my lifetime by Congress. Like you were saying in the 60s. I was born in the 80s. So if you're talking about needing appropriate declarations of war just to go to war, it hasn't happened in my lifetime. And that was a huge thing for me. And then on top of that, listening to the conversation when you went into you have to want your personal freedom, you have to vote for it. She well, again, I'm sure it's hard to interview a libertarian. She was just like, well, that's where we're at. You gave this incredible libertarian answer, and she's just like, well, I guess that's it.
I probably could have expounded a little bit more on some of those things, and I think she wanted me to. And I think where she was going with the gun rights thing, and we have permission. We don't need permission. We have a right, but it's fundamentally, and I'm going to diverge, and we can talk about war because.
Well, first, that was just the preview of you, Randy. Why don't you go ahead and just tell people who you are first, and a little bit about you that we don't get to see from all of that. You know, what made you run? Just go ahead, and I'm going to give you the screen and tell everybody who Randy Llewellyn is. Uriah, what do you want people to know about you?
Well, let's not get too personal. I hope I can use a little humor here. It's sometimes you wonder in these interviews, people take it wrong. And,
no. I should explain this. My name's CJ Abernathy. I call myself a warlord. So yeah, you're safe to say whatever you want, how you want. Because again, if I'm voting for you, and so I want to know who my representative's going to be, who's representing the message that I wish my representative was saying. So I want to take this as a chance for my audience who might not know you or of your works to get to know you. So what brought you, let's just start with what brought you to the Libertarian Party and why this race?
Man, how much time do you have?
I don't have a job and I only have to be somewhere at like 10:45. So I got some time.
I'm 62 years old. One of my earliest recollections was when my father called me and my brothers into the house, and we watched after JFK was assassinated. I think everybody watched it. It shocked the nation. And so, I mean, not that started my political career by any means, but it's a vivid memory and for me. And as I grew up through the Vietnam War, and I came from a very conservative Christian household and very loving people, and it deeply affected me. In fact, I reflect on that a lot. And I was actually quite patriotic in the sense that I unquestionably felt like the government knew what it was doing, and I needed to follow that. And I enlisted. I enlisted in the United States Army Infantry. Fortunately, it was at the end of the war. I enlisted at 17 years old. And in the interim, and when I said 10 good years, I had the 2 years active. Back then, they had just ended the draft, and they started what's called the VOLAR, the Volunteer Army, and they were in such need of bodies that you can enlist for 2 years, and then the other 4 years were reserve, and you would get the same benefits. And so it was actually a good deal for me because I couldn't get into the college I wanted to, and it changed my life. In fact, I start rambling. You see what I'm saying here? This could be a long story.
No.
I'm actually going I'm going down here in November over my birthday. In fact, I'm meeting two of my Army buddies that I met in basic training in Fort Polk, Louisiana, which was, they called it Little Vietnam. And they're having a big anniversary down there of its creation and what have you. And all who have served there and been there can tour the entire base free and go wherever they want. So we're going down, me and my two buddies, and we're going to see if there's anything left when we were there. And
yeah, I have an old stomping grounds too. I wish I could go back to someday, kind of like a return to Mecca kind of thing, where it all began. So you served, and a lot of people were in that situation, Randy, that, they believed, like you said, the government could do no wrong, that there was an omnipotent government that had a plan, a direction, a unity, rally behind a flag. What what in your sense, given the fact that in hindsight, the Vietnam War being, one of the most disastrous things this country's ever done, in terms of sheer death and magnitude and loss of, property and destruction and an entire generation lost, to, essentially the cartel, the big and military industrial complex of this country that pushed us into this war that lasted just almost as long as we've been in Afghanistan today. But, do you kind of see that as the tie between, the time you're talking about in Vietnam to today with Afghanistan? Do you see that being a similar, in Iraq as well, a similar situation? I mean, when you say we got to get that power out of the hands of the executive branch, I don't think people really understand where all that came from. I mean, most people, they still are in that mindset of government's good as long as my team is in control. But both sides have also funded both of these wars. Both have compromised. How do you see yourself as a libertarian in an elected libertarian to the House of Representatives, using your vote when it comes to standing against these wars, knowing the experience that you've been through? How do you use your vote to make a change?
Good question, but I want to back up a little bit. And I'm a big historian, and I'm actually on the board here at the Historical Society here in Fall River County. It's huge for me. I study history a lot, and let's do backtrack. The last, I believe, declared war was World War II, and then there was Korea, and that was not a declared war, and that was the beginning of the executive branch taking control, taking the reins away from the representatives and saying, okay, this is important. We need to do this. And the primary tool that was used then and now is fear. And we look back on Korea and Vietnam, and we were told of all things, and it's almost laughable now, the domino theory, that if one country succumbs or is taken over by the communists, it's just they'll follow suit and they'll take over the world. And everybody was afraid of that. And now we're looking back, we're going, really? And then this the current conflict, the second longest war. The longest war is the war on drugs, foisted on us also by fear, by Richard Nixon, which we're dealing with now. We're dealing with it even in the state. When you were talking about the legalization of marijuana, that's just a long history of fear and what have you. But the second longest war, it was the weapons of mass destruction. We were so afraid. And we were told to be afraid, and it's time to stop being afraid. And I'm going to use a quote from the Bible. All right, I'm
fair enough,
and that is, I probably don't get it right. I think it's 1 John 4:7 or something like that. There's no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. Now that's from the Bible. It's time for us to approach things out of love and not out of fear.
That's and that brings me to a great segue. One of the comments here from a friend of mine that I've known for a long time, Mr. Ingram, says it's refreshing to hear a candidate respect another person of a different political party. And I think that kind of speaks to what you're saying, is that, between you and Dusty giving each other that mutual respect, I don't think it's Dusty necessarily saying, hey, come to our mainstream conversations and let me get you through all the front doors, but or all these locked doors that would otherwise be locked for any libertarian. But, it's, to me, there is something that's humanizing about running in a race, although, how do you get through it with that message of love to say, we disagree fundamentally, politically, But when it comes down to it, the Republican Party out here in South Dakota, they vote to essentially use their vote to kill people like me, kill people that think differently than them. They use it as a tool to use the force of government through their vote and as a collective. And so how do we essentially love our abusers is the question that comes out of that.
I don't know if it goes that far, CJ. Loving, but abuse is a huge problem. So, and we don't want to make light of that. But in some form or fashion, we probably have all had some kind of encounter with abuse and abusive individuals, and it's not a pretty thing. I think that in our very busy lives, the people of South Dakota are pretty amazing, and I think they're good people, and I think they can think logically and reasonably, and so I have a lot of faith in them. Getting this kind of a message out is problematic. I know it's great having shows like yours where people are speaking out, and I am truly grateful to the radio stations and TV stations that have interviewed me, and newspapers, and not all of them. But can you imagine a point in time when every candidate gets equal coverage, just simply because that's what the people demand? And we don't want to be spoon-fed just one doctrine or one side or one opinion. We want that discussion. We want a debate. We want a dialogue. And it's only through that where that we'll actually create change. And no, we're not going to convince each other completely, but we can come to what we've always done until it has broken down, is compromise. And nobody's going to get their way. And that is actually a good thing about our system, because we want everybody to be treated equally under the law.
Right. And now when you say treated equally under the law, there's several concerns I have with the law. So being somebody that's going to be making laws, if elected, what are the two big main issues for you if you got elected that you would try to bring change into DC to South Dakota? What would be if you get elected, you spend 4 years, after 4 years, what would be a measure of success to you, or one or two measures of success? If you're elected and by the time 4 years is up, you accomplish this, then that's a victory. What would you consider that to be?
Okay, I'm gonna digress again because
you can sidebar all you want, for sure.
First of all, I'm going to correct you. It's only 2 years as Congress.
My bad. Yes, 2 years. I stand corrected. Yes, sir.
Let's go back to the whole concept of law, and I think it's important and fundamental that people understand, and I think they do. But we have this gargantuous volume of laws that exists even now, and let's be really clear. Laws have never stopped anything. I mean, even our most basic laws, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not lie. People are still lying. People are still stealing. Murder still happens. It doesn't stop anything. Even with the overwhelming punishment of hell, if you will, it still happens.
Now, wait, real quick. I'm going to sidebar your sidebar here. Okay, so you're telling me that the Meth We're On It campaign did not stop meth?
Exactly.
I mean, you're telling me that people are going to find their niche, their fix, their drug of choice, regardless of what the law says. So that's where I take interest with the law. I think that so after 2 years, there's so many laws. The measure of success in this case being that you want to, is there a certain policy direction you want to see go in regards to these amount of laws? is there a key piece of legislation that you would want to bring to the floor? I mean, if you were elected as a libertarian, you're dealing with Republicans and Democrats. I mean, for 2 years, how do you actually get something done in that time frame of 2 years if you're just the voice that they're like, oh, that's the libertarians, you know? How do you actually accomplish something?
Well, the truthful answer, and probably the most straightforward, is accomplishing something of that magnitude is probably impossible in 2 years. But baby steps. You know, I think what people are alarmed about, particularly when libertarians like myself or anybody else starts talking about these things, and they're going, yeah, but man, that's going to create tremendous change, and I don't know if we can deal with that. And because where we are now has been a slow evolution to this point, we have to be realistic that the way out is also going to be probably a slow and gradual process, but it has to start in baby steps, and that's the best way I can say it, because you crawl before you learn to walk, and then you take small steps and you work your way. So some cataclysmic change that I hope to accomplish is probably unreasonable and almost illogical.
Okay, let's get your dream scenario, and then let's go with the realistic outcome then.
Well, have you been on my website, CJ?
Yeah, I've been on your website. It's right here. If you
there's a whole list of my visions of where we can go. Have you seen that?
Well, your visions are. Is it to your page?
There's a whole list of them there, and not by priority.
Was it your message to voters?
Yeah. It's there's a whole list, and each one of those is probably a tall order in and of itself. But I would like to work that.
I like how you've addressed this to both the political spectrums and the people that may be in the middle. And, you know, there's an unrealistic goal would be you want to use your vote to muster all the votes to bring back the power to Congress and be a tripartisan voice in that conversation. The thing that I think is realistic, though, is that and it's kind of showing with what you're saying about Dusty, and is that you would want to build that relationship to say, hey, if the people of your state elect a libertarian, you're going to prove that by having a libertarian elected to the federal office for House Representatives for the state, the world is going to still keep spinning. Is that what you're saying? That the sun will still rise if a libertarian is elected?
Well, it's certainly a baby step, and but it can be a game changer. When I've often said that I can walk in both camps, and by doing so, I can converse and maybe have dialogue with both sides. Right now, the gridlock that exists, and I call it the dysfunctional duopoly, it seems like nothing is really happening and solution is not taking place. Will it happen if Randy Llewellyn gets into Congress? Probably not. And let's be realistic. But it's a beginning, because bringing in a third party and a third choice, I mean, I don't know if you're familiar that the balanced budget amendment failed by one vote. Mm-hmm. One vote. Yeah. Interesting. Votes do count. Your vote counts. My vote counts. A lot of people want to say, "Oh, my vote doesn't count." Yes, it does.
Yeah. No. You know, even at our state convention, you realize that a coin flip can count. You know, that was an example. You know, of, well, my vote doesn't matter. Well, yeah, it does, because your vote matters, because then it went to a coin flip. I mean. That's just a small example, but you know, so back to again the premise of these slow steps. I think you're right. You're building that relationship with these other two parties in a way that says, hey, we're going to still be here, still be alive if libertarians are elected. You know, we're still.
Revolution is not going to happen.
Yes. So and in fact, being a libertarian, you would think that the one thing that the two parties would realize is that we signed this, non-aggression. We sign on to the non-aggression principle that we won't use violence for our political agenda. So we're basically saying we're going to talk a lot. We're not going to do anything, physical or use violence or anything like that to means to an end for our political goals. So, when you take on that aspect, you would think that there'd be more people willing to have conversations and say, hey, what is this libertarian self-ownership thing you all keep talking about? What message in the Libertarian Party do you think resonates most with the voters of South Dakota? If you had to put it into a statement, what principles or part of our plank, what do you think draws people's interest to considering voting Libertarian?
I think you mentioned it, but I don't think you used the verbiage that I would use. The Libertarian plank of we don't believe in the use of force, and to force somebody else, typically we think of at gunpoint or something like that, but the ultimate force is actually law, because when you have law, you have punishment, and you maybe even incarceration, and people suffer because they are forced by law to do something, or if they don't do it, they are damaged and hurt by it. And so I think what resonates, certainly with me, and I think with most people, is say, why should I be punished for a decision I make for myself, and it doesn't involve anybody else, or I'm not hurting anybody else, I'm not damaging anybody else's property? Why should I be damaged for that? And the answer is, of course, you shouldn't. And so ultimately, I guess there ought to be a massive rescindage. Is that a word? Rescindage?
It is now, as of today, yes.
Yeah, a massive rescindage of a lot of these laws that, it's like the straw that broke the camel's back. You start small, but with enough of these laws, it becomes a burden that no one can bear. And we walk through our lives, and instead of feeling free and able to invent and prosper, we're always looking over our shoulder. When you see that police car in your rearview mirror, what do you think?
Any blue and red and white flashing lights behind you could be your death. So that's just a fact.
And I'm not at all saying that we don't need police. We need police. My son is a police officer, and I've spoken about him. I'm very proud of him. He's received the Medal of Honor and the Cross of Valor. Wow. He's a police officer in Aurora, Colorado, and he was one of the first responders to the theater shooting there in Aurora. Mm-hmm. And he still has a hard time talking about that. And but what happened there, I think, is a great deal to do with the good things that happened with him, but he won't admit that. But having said that, when I'm talking about that, and we can go into this limited immunity and what have you, and I think it needs to be adjusted. Not completely removed.
So okay, that's a great point there. Let's stop to that. Let's say, so you wouldn't go as far as the Libertarian presidential and vice presidential candidates by saying ending qualified immunity and absolute immunity for judges and law enforcement officers. You have a line somewhere where you think that they should have zero liability for their actions, or do you believe that they should be held civilly accountable for the mistakes they make?
That's good. Let's talk about that. First of all, I think most people don't realize that limited immunity is actually not a law. It's a precedent set by the courts. And the original law in question actually was back in after the Civil War, when there were actually government officials, be it the sheriff or county or state officials, that were inhibiting people, the ex-slaves, from voting, the Ku Klux Klan and what have you, and they weren't doing anything about it, or they were involved in it. and it gave the federal government the right to prosecute them for doing such. And I believe that Grant actually used the federal forces to enforce the right of the ex-slaves to vote. He was stopped by that, by what they call the posse comitatus. Am I going too detailed here? Okay.
Nope, you're good.
And the posse comitatus basically said, and that was generated by the opposition, the Democratic Party. It said that you can't use federal forces outside of federal property in the United States, which conveniently blocked Grant from using, and in that case, Sherman and Sheridan were deeply involved in prosecuting and enabling ex-slaves to vote. It stopped him from being able to do that. Now, let's move forward in time. So the out of that law and out of the posse comitatus, and then of course it became court precedent and decisions that said, okay, well, when you're in the prosecution of your duty as a government official, be it a policeman or in an office, a public office, and you're dutifully following the statutes, you cannot be held civilly liable. And that's a key word, is civilly. You can't be sued or taken to court for doing that. And it has evolved to this point where you can be criminally prosecuted if you break the law. That's still there. But the court precedent has got to the point where there has to be a case exactly like yours for someone to civilly prosecute you. And you're shaking your head, but but anyway, it's gotten to this point. Now, there has to be a degree of limited immunity, and I'm going to tell you why. You've been in the military. Are you a hunter? I mean, I'm just asking you.
No, I've actually never actually got to go hunting. No, I wish.
Well, but there are moments in our lives, and particularly in those two instances, where you have to pull the trigger. It's a moment, and you don't get to debate it. You don't have to think about it and ask people about it. That you have to do that. And I'm going to tell you a story about my son when he was a rookie cop, and he came to me and he told me, and this is one of his early experiences after he'd been through the police academy and what have you. And of course, they try to vet people. Particularly the police and who's in there, and then they try to train them properly, as in everything. But in this case, he went to a domestic disturbance call, and that's probably one of the most dangerous because it's unpredictable what people will do. And in this case, the individual involved was facing him coming down the stairs with a knife. And he told him several times to drop the knife, and he pulled out his weapon, and he told him several times. He told me, and I said, and he said, fortunately, his partner had come behind and tased him from behind.
Ooh, but in that moment, though.
Yeah, but I asked him. I said, son, would you pull the trigger? It's that moment, that reckoning moment. Now, if he did that and he maimed that man, maybe killed him, he shouldn't be liable for that split-second decision to be sued for everything he owns and impoverish him the rest of his life. And a comment that he's made to me recently about the complete removal of limited immunity, the whole concept. He says most of his fellow officers agree that if that's the case, they're never going to go into a dangerous situation because you never know what's going to happen.
Now, real quick, Randy, to sidebar on this, a lot of these domestic disputes, a lot of these issues are actually incentivized by our government. So It's really sad to see that, and again, I'm not saying that the individual isn't responsible for their own actions, but certainly we have government systems in place that instigate domestic disputes, domestic violence, that they actually, you think that there's a solving of the problem by some of these organizations, but they're actually perpetuating the problem, increasing the funding in certain areas for programs that incentivize there to be domestic disputes. So to me, it's the issue of immunity in that aspect. This is where I think libertarians, we just because your son's a police officer does not mean that he does not have the right to defend himself. Just because your son is a police officer doesn't mean that he doesn't have a capacity within his job where if somebody is going to come at him in a way with a knife or a weapon of sorts, that he doesn't have the appropriate self-defense, argument. And I agree in that aspect. But where I'm saying is qualified immunity and absolute immunity, absolute falling more on the judicial side of things, but qualified, at least for law enforcement, I can agree to a certain extent where there's somebody that is presenting a clear, imminent, immediate threat, and an officer has to defend themselves using lethal force. Just because, again, they're an officer doesn't mean that they're not a human and they don't have their right to self-defense. So I agree in that aspect. Where I disagree with the civil part of immunity, and I think most libertarians would agree with me, is that everybody should be held to the equal justice under the law. Everybody should be treated equally under the law, and to set aside the immunity part of that little special nugget for a certain class of people puts some above the law. And so, they're like, for example, right here in South Dakota, the Attorney General of our state hit a man, left him dead in the road, thought it was a deer, very suspicious circumstances, not sitting in a jail cell today, where had it been you or I, we wouldn't get no police cruiser. We wouldn't get no going back home. We wouldn't get no 14, 15 hours and then a alcohol test once it's clearly past the time for a blood test for alcohol. We wouldn't have gotten any of these things that he got that day. And so that's part of that in your duties of your job, immunity. They treat people differently that are a part of this class, and you can see that. So I don't think that we should have a limited immunity for anybody in that aspect of taking away a civil approach, because that would make it so that, again, there's people that'll say I have immunity, and I think that puts them over the law. So how do you kind of solve that problem between equal justice under the law but not for these people? How do you reconcile those two?
Actually, it's simpler than you think, CJ, because if you remember, I tried to explain to you that it's actually not a law. It's a precedent set by some court. So to clarify it, by the legislature saying, okay, this is what limited immunity involves, and make it very clear, then the courts cannot use precedent anymore. They have to go by the law, and they need clarification. And nobody, you bring up the case of the local case of the Attorney General here in South Dakota. Most of us are watching that and are appalled that anybody should be given special dispensation just because of who they are. And this whole idea of equal treatment of the law precludes that. I mean, everybody needs to be treated the same across the board in every issue. So, I think a lot of people are suspicious of that whole situation. And, but we also have to remember a lot of what we hear, and
and I'm not asking you to speculate. I'm not asking you to judge anything. But I am using that as the example of just a clear example to me where there is a sort of a separation of the ruling class from the slave class. And you know, to my point though, again, I agree with you. Equal protection, equal justice, equality is what I think is a very fair statement to make. And so again, reconciling that with an immunity, do you think that when it comes to immunity, and I think there's a gray ground here that we could walk with libertarians to say that they should be able to be held civilly liable if a jury of 12 says that they were guilty of a crime.
Absolutely.
Would you agree that if you're a public official, a sheriff, a deputy, somebody who has a claim to qualified immunity or absolute immunity, that if a jury of 12 finds them criminally liable in a case, that civilly they should be open to it, that would at least lessen the effect of, hey, I shot somebody or I hit somebody, I have immunity, or I'm a different class of person. Do you think that that'd be a fair compromise?
I don't think we need. I don't think we need to compromise. I think that's what you're saying is exactly so. I mean, if you're convicted by your peers of committing a crime, you're civilly liable. The problem, and maybe it hasn't been clear, but the precedent has been set in the courts that unless there's been another case that's exactly like that and that they've been convicted of it, then you cannot civilly prosecute them in this case. Well, that's never going to happen, because if it's never prosecuted in the first place, I mean, it's in 22,
Yes.
and it needs to be clarified, and the courts need to be given direction. And until then, I'm not a lawyer, but the courts work off precedent, and
Yes.
It's a system that has fundamentally worked for us. Not always. Even up to Supreme Court, there's been dubious decisions that, and we could probably talk about those.
Yeah, it sounds like we're going to need another show. You know, so Randy, again, I want to kind of touch on everybody's base, because I did get some questions for you, real quick, rapid fire round, if you don't mind. I think we can handle it. I think we kicked the qualified immunity horse pretty well, but so Constitutional Amendment A and Measure 26. Where do you stand?
I think there's a little video that Greg made of me holding up the signs. Of course, I support.
Greg is great.
Because for the very fundamental reason that you've already brought up and that we've talked about we own ourselves, and if you're not hurting someone else and you're not damaging property, you need to be let alone. And I want to add to that, and I forget who the Supreme Court justice was, and he's long dead now, but he actually made the statement, and this is from the Supreme Court, that one of our most valued constitutional rights is to be let alone, to live our lives and think and act and prosper and whatever. And I'm a firm believer in that. I mean, we need to be let alone. Until we commit an actual crime.
The right to be left alone.
Let alone.
Let alone. Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah.
I mean, that's kind of old. That's a kind of old language, but it kind of it does mean left alone.
Yeah. Right to be let alone.
Let me alone. You know.
Yeah, it's evolved to left, because I'm sure lazy English over the years has ruined that. Samuel Warren and Louis Brenellis. I'm just looking up that quote. A great quote, but yeah, I think so. So the government, we want the government, and I think this is a fair statement to make for libertarians, is that, collectively, when you give the government the power to make a decision, it tends to make the decision that least benefits the individual. So we lose more individual freedom, privacy, to be left alone, that our neighbor's vote actually changes, our life, that you just got done saying one vote does matter. Well, if my neighbor votes that I'm the bad guy and the laws should be used against me, I'm going to have the the Secret Service kicking in my door and, telling me that I'm a threat to the democracy. I mean, so, how do we balance this as libertarians to say that, we want our self-ownership, we want our freedom, we don't want to be pandered to as a party that is, either conservative fiscally and socially liberal. I like the phrase, I'm socially libertarian and fiscally libertarian. How do we bring this to a head where a candidate like yourself can actually just have a message that is relatable and not to where it's, well, he's just a libertarian, they're crazy guys, they'll just talk about conspiracies and Vietnam and Herbert Hoover and how he screwed up the country. How do we get past this is what the mainstream tells you what a libertarian is, this is what an actual libertarian is? How do you see yourself in that role, defining your candidacy, and again, honorably? I don't just endorse anybody and say, hey, that's my vote. My vote I actually value. So how do you see yourself saying to the people of South Dakota, this is what libertarianism is, and this is how it can benefit you? Where do you see that message benefiting the most?
Okay, well, you spoke a long time, and I have to, I have to digress one more from the beginning. CJ, this whole concept of laws, a lot of the times, not all the time, but a great deal of the time. Well, I'm going to start with this. The worst thing about a democracy is being the minority. Because the majority can and often do force, by rule of law, their way, their lifestyle, whatever, on those that are not in the majority. And this starts from the bottom all the way up. We see it even at the local level, and I've often said that. I mean, a lot of the ordinances, even at the city level, telling you you can't have your grass over 6 inches tall. This was laws are made by a certain sect of people who think, well, I want to control my neighbor, and I will use the law to bludgeon him into submission. If I don't like the way he takes care of his lawn, or if he doesn't spray his dandelions, or come on, it goes down to the very basic levels. He lets his dog loose. I don't like that.
Yeah.
And so, as a libertarian, I'm going to move forward then to try to answer your question.
Yes, please.
In the long run, freedom is a great responsibility because it requires self-responsibility. And I love Jefferson's quote. I don't know if I can quote it word for word. I can look it up and quote it for you. But rightful liberty, the correct liberty, is the pursuing of your own pursuits, what have you, surrounded by the pursuits of your fellow man. Not by the law, because the law is often a tyrant's will.
And always so when it violates the right of an individual.
Exactly. Thank you. I should commit that to memory.
Yeah, no, it's a good one. And that's and I think that really speaks to what I'm asking, because, for example, somebody like myself, again, who just wants to have my freedom. I want my sovereignty on my own land. I want to be, have that responsibility of freedom in my lifetime. But what do you say? And again, before we close this out, I got 2 more questions for you. We got about 8 minutes left before I got to head off to Adam versus the man. But first off, one person wanted me to ask you, is taxation theft?
In its purest form, yes, of course, because they're taking, without your permission, if you will, something that belongs to you, the sweat and toil of your brow, as Lincoln would say it. And that doesn't belong to anybody but you. Do we need taxation? Yes, of course. But it has reached a scale that it's actually fed on itself, and we can go back through the history of it, even from the movement from violating the constitutional that we shouldn't have a direct tax under Wilson, to a scale which it actually impacts every life in this country. And the programs that it funds and what have you, you don't get much permission in that either. I mean, you don't have much say in that either, except through your representatives. So,
okay, so real quick, Randy, let's say you are my elected representative, and I say, hey, Randy, I don't like the fact that the government is using civil asset forfeiture to take my property due to unpaid property taxes. I feel like that's renting to own my own land, that there's a perpetual tax that they will use through the government systems to tax me off my own land. I don't like that. You're my representative. I don't want to pay it. Now what?
Okay, well, let's back up. Civil forfeiture is more about, and I don't agree with that either. That was I think a Biden legislation, if I'm not mistaken, and it has to do with criminal actions, and if you're any way connected with it, they can take your assets and your property that are remotely connected. And
right, but in this case,
this
this is unpaid taxes.
But now, so let's go to the property taxes. You mentioned that. I mean, you throw out a lot of things, CJ, and I have to qualify these things.
Yes, sir.
The property taxes is a state issue. It's not a federal issue. Most of our property taxes go to the schools. Another portion of it, and I don't know how much the proportion goes to other county.
I feel like I should have known that property taxes would be the bad example in this, but again,
well, I mean, I want to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, how can you tie this into the federal side of things?
Well, the property taxes, and once again, this is a state issue. And first of all, in the state of South Dakota, they're not equal. And the fact that ultimately, if you don't pay those or you can't pay those, the county can come and actually take your property and sell it at auction, or in the case of where they sell delinquent tax certificates, if someone else pays it for you and you don't pay them back at 10% interest, they can take your property. They can take ownership of your property. That's difficult. Basically, in a nutshell, you're paying rent on the property that you should own. There has to be a better way, or at least it has to be more equal. I mean, and I'm going to say this, and I'm going to get crucified for this, but the property tax in this state is vague, and it is totally unequal. How is it that a commercial property, say here in town, and they have a half an acre, and they don't even use it, maybe it's vacant, but it's zoned commercial, and they'll pay, I don't know, $2,000 a year on that piece of property. And then a rancher has 2,000 acres, and because it's zoned agricultural, he pays $1 an acre. $2,000 for 2,000 acres, and this guy's paying $2,000 for a vacant half acre in town.
Well, I was accused, Randy, of being in the pocket of big corn, and so and
I'm not. See, the thing is, it's all in zoning and terminology and what have you, and how equal is that? It's not. And if we're going to agree to pay property taxes and support our schools, well, let's at least make it equal across the board. And we can say the same thing for income tax. I mean, why is it that Donald Trump paid $750? Maybe he paid $1 million a few years, whatever, but he has access to the means, the loopholes, the people that understand this or whatever. Why does it have to be that complex? Why aren't we all just paying the same?
Yeah, you'd think this word equal actually means something.
Yeah.
I don't know, but yeah, one of the things I've really appreciated about you, Randy, is that again, it's a dialogue that we need to have this voice. While I disagree in some aspects with your idea of taxation, and there should be some. I take the truest form that all taxation is theft without consent, and I actually think that our government we should have the option to voluntarily pay taxes. So like, for example, if I want to pay zero taxes, I can pay zero taxes. If I want to pay 100% taxes, I can actually pay all of my income to the government if I choose. And so what do you think about this concept of voluntary taxation where you choose where the money goes and how much? Or do you think it should be used with a gun, force government, go in a cage, take your land? Do you think that we should have that form of government, or do you think we should say a successful government is one that's voluntarily funded and nothing more, nothing less to its balanced budget? What say you? Do you think that we should have a balancing stick there?
CJ, certainly it shouldn't be taken with a gun. But if ultimately it is, because if it's punishable by law, you can be incarcerated and what have you, and you can have loss and punishment for that. But I want you to think about this, CJ. I don't know how you got to work today. Did you?
I went from my bed to my desk. Yeah.
maybe
I think the coffee pot was somewhere in between.
But I do know that when I go to work and I haul my mixer and my scaffold and I go to jobs and I go on a road that's well maintained, and that's the result of us corporately deciding, this is important that we have roads. And when my house is on fire, I can call the fire department and they'll come and we have corporately determined that we want to protect our residences, our buildings from fire. We made those decisions corporately, and that's where it's got to be. So I would disagree with you that there's decisions that are good and that we all benefit from, and that's the key. Do we all benefit from this taxation, or so? When you take it to the maybe the state or the federal level, it gets so complex, and the amount of departments and the amount of beneficiaries of our tax dollars are far beyond most individuals comprehending, and certainly don't have their say in their agreement in that. So well, I don't know if that helps.
No, it allows me to know where you're at. See, and I think again, but being a libertarian in this case, in these baby steps you referred to, you can't just tell the Democrats and Republicans, well, we're going to take away all the money you guys play with, and you only get to play with what's given to you through voluntary means. I think that actually, to me, is the actual grand solution to the problem known as government. But the thing that I can respect about this in this aspect is you're saying let's get libertarianism to where it's understandable for people, to where your average voter here in South Dakota at least isn't going to view it as I would take it to its extreme it's extreme outcome with for example, gun laws. Any infringement on the Second Amendment is unconstitutional. Whether it be bump stocks or red flag laws, any of that aspect. My opinion is that we should have a government so small we question if we have a government at all. That's my take on government. But when you run for a federal office, you see it different. And Randy, I got one more question that I got for you, and that is, if you win, lose, or draw, are you staying in the party? And do you have any other office that you could see yourself running for?
I will certainly stay in the party and be involved. Running for public office is something I have done numerous times, and if you look at my career, it's almost exhausting thinking about it. And running for office, CJ, requires a great deal of energy, if not a lot of money in the current system. I wish it wasn't so. I wish there was equal. If we could just, if every candidate was given equal opportunity for people to via website, or whether equal in interviews like yourself, and newspapers, what have you, we could probably take a lot of money out of politics. Right now, there's just an astounding amount of money spent, be it for all these signs and the posters and ad nauseam.
You got to get your name out there, though, in order to
Right,
be
but if we had equal coverage, just voluntarily by various medias like yourself.
Well, when's the last time you had an interview that went about an hour?
Yes, yeah. So I kind of went down a rabbit hole there, but will I run again? My wife will actually acknowledge that I haven't in the past often said I'm never doing this again. I mean, it's too much energy, and then it happens again. And I've had to eat a lot of crow there. And will I run again after this? It's interesting, because when I first agreed to do this at the state convention,
I was there. Yeah.
The air and the mentality was, you're not going to win, but you can help get the word out. People can learn about libertarianism, and we can get better ballot access. And in this situation where Dusty was running unopposed, they almost couldn't deny that we'd be given a voice. There's the possibility, slim it may be, that we may actually get a seat at the table.
Yeah, and that's where, again, I think I'm not saying that the Democrats made a mistake without running, because that's our benefit, without running a candidate. But to that point, Dusty Johnson or any of these candidates, a lot of us are running two-way races. So somebody has the chance of getting an elected spot this year. I certainly hope you get a spot in DC. I'd love to watch your, Randy Llewellyn up here on my TV giving a big speech in the halls of Congress from the libertarian perspective. And so, Randy, we did offer Dusty Johnson an opportunity to come on and just have a conversation. It would have been just like this. I sidebar ramble for a little bit. You sidebar ramble for a little bit, but we get to an interesting conversation of points, even if we disagree, still respectful. I would still encourage Dusty to reach out, and I'd be more than willing to facilitate a conversation between you two. I think that having a public conversation between you two, and I go back to that because we don't have that today, and I don't want to leave this loose end, that having a public conversation between you two to see the differences and where you can agree, to show that that it's not this what the internet would make it out to be, that we're just all enemies, that we can actually have civil conversation with our ideological, political different opponent, and to say, hey, we can have this civil conversation. I think that your answer for taxation is going to be different than Dusty's. I think your answer to civil asset forfeiture will be different than his. And the only way to not make that speculation is to have that conversation. So I can't thank you enough for even doing this. This was, like I said, spur of the moment. I just tagged an endorsement post with you and said it was a crime that this conversation didn't get to happen, but you did a phenomenal job on PBS. You did a phenomenal job this election, running for our House seat for our party. And Randy, I'm going to give you the floor to close it off. Whatever you want to say, any loose ends. I want to make sure everybody goes to your website, randylewallen.com, and checks it out. You got, again, a message to everybody really, and what you would bring. And I absolutely love that you introduced and got to speak at the Joe Jorgensen campaign there. I thought that was such an awesome opportunity for you to go out and see the campaign like that. But yeah, any parting thoughts, Randy? Any saved rounds? Anything that we didn't hit that you wish we could have? And what do you got to say to the voters of South Dakota?
Once again, CJ,
I give you 20 things to talk about. You can pick from the plethora, sir.
I do want to say that I'm sure that Dusty, given his schedule, if it is afforded to him to do so, I believe that he will probably have an interview with you. I cannot say, I'm not part of his staff, but being the only representative for the state of South Dakota, that's a great responsibility, and I'm sure his schedule is quite filled up, and that needs to be said. I appreciate what you're doing here. I like I'm totally against anybody, despite their views being belittled or publicly. We don't need that.
And Randy, to that point, I will admit I've had a really hard time in my adjusting to not take that approach of love, respect, understanding. I've been, in the last 2 months, I have been very upset with the fact that realizing that people are voting as we speak to use violence against me because I believe different than them has caused a resentment in me that is translating over the screen, visible to a lot of my friends and family. So that's why when I hear a message like yours and knowing that you're in a race that's on a greater scale than mine, although all races are good fundamentally, I wish and hope that there's a day where I can be as compassionate as you towards the other side. I think that I even said it in the XCOM meeting last night that it's very hard for me to humanize people who I believe are voting against me strictly just because their vote is equal to force against me, and it's hard to reconcile that. So I think that you're a good example, and I'm really, like I said, I'm happy to endorse you this time around, and hope you'll stay in the party, get involved, maybe run for an XCOM position, an at-large seat, or whatever, vice chair, whatever you're feeling. At least we know that you're going to be around and a voice that we get to have in our party. And like I said, I think that there's a lot to benefit from. So, Randy, again, I know we can ramble all day. You and I could probably do a show together and ramble all day long too. But, again, I just can't thank you enough for joining. Again, your website, randylewallen.com. Randy, thanks for joining me. And again, any closing remarks, anything you want to say before we wrap this up?
Well, you never give me enough time.
I'll give you all the time you want. You tell me when you're.
I actually laughed a little earlier because I noticed there was a child in the background waving their arms, and I thought that's awesome,
Yeah, she wants to get herself some chocolate milk and then her bowl of cereal, and I had to give her the old thumbs up. You can have yourself some chocolate milk. So there you go.
Well done there. I'll just close with this. And this is not my statement, and I actually don't know who said it. Maybe you do, but in the end, we're all just walking home together, and I think South Dakota and the people of South Dakota are very good people, and if anybody's going to send a non-status quo candidate to Washington, it's going to be South Dakota, and so I'm very proud of them.
And again, Randy, thanks for joining me today. Dusty Johnson, open invitation as always for coffee and a conversation. If Dusty says yes, I'm sure Randy would love to join us too. Randy, thanks so much for joining me today, and good luck on your campaign. I look forward to. Are you going to be at the election party on Tuesday in Watertown?
That's about a 500-mile drives on it.
Oh, dang. Okay, well, will we at least see you at our convention next year?
Oh, well, I'm gonna remain, and I never answer the question. And you know, if I say I'm never gonna run again, I will.
We're
My
good.
wife just laughed.
Yes.
But,
You know what? I can totally relate. When I ran for governor in 2018, my better half said never again, and I said, well, and now here we are running for Senate. So
yeah, exactly.
you know, you never say never, and I have no doubt that in our next convention we can say, hey, Randy, we nominate Randy for this position. A second. Before you know it, you're running for House of Representatives and running for office. So thanks again for joining me, Randy.
Thank you, CJ. All right, yeah. Good luck to you, and have a good life.
Yeah, you too. I'll see you again soon. This ain't goodbye. This isn't until next time. But Randy, again, thank you for all that you do, and I will. You're welcome on here anytime. You want to come on and have a talk? You need a platform. I also want to get you on Adam versus the Man, so I'll get with you later and get you on a larger platform than my humble little platform, and get your voice out there to a lot more people than just my audience.
I enjoyed the interview. I wish there was some way you could put this or can encapsulate it and put it on the website or something.
It's already been shared to the South Dakota Libertarian Party. I can send you a downloaded copy, and you can do with it as you please, sir.
Yeah, because we don't want to be just preaching to the choir.
No, we want to let everybody know that there is a conversation to be had, and you'd love to have it. So you know, and that's all we can do for each other is help promote. And so again, I think you're going to do pretty well, better than I think we can expect on November 3rd. You know, whether or not you win or lose is up to the voters, and I think you're going to pull off at least decent numbers. I don't see you taking anything lower than 25%, maybe 30%. You know, if everybody turns out.
Well, I have to add to this.
You're like, wait, we're going to sign more again.
Well, I actually have a wager. Originally, when I agreed to run, there was one writer, and I can't remember his name right off the bat, but he in his article said. He'll take less than 10% of the vote. And I wrote to him and I challenged him. I said, look, you know, I think I'm going to take over 30. I said, are you willing to wager on it? And he said, yeah. So we have a monetary wager on that.
I say 30 because there's no Democrat. I say 30 because there's a big independent vote out here. And there's only two choices. So really, it's the grading scale of government. You know, if you don't like your government, and you want to see a fundamental shift and change, Randy Llewellyn is the only option from changing the status quo. So again, if you want to get a hold of him, his website, randylewellyn.com, and I'm sure he'd be willing to do interviews as we count down this last week. And yeah, I can't begin to tell you. I hope you'll come back. I hope you'll pop in and tell me about it after the fact. Will you at least give me one more interview before the next convention?
I'll do the best I can.
Awesome, sir. All right. Thank you, Randy Llewellyn, everybody. Have a great day, sir. All right. That is Coffee and a Conversation for today. Again, my guest, Randy Llewellyn. Thank you so much for tuning in. I tried my best to behave myself. So, Devin, if you're watching, you know, I hope this was shareable. Greg, somebody, anybody. Yeah, that was incredible to have that conversation with Randy. I have 14 minutes to go get to Adam versus the Man. So with that being said, you guys have a good day or don't. The choice is always yours.